A lot to feast your eyes on in the new CBS series, Star Trek Discovery.
Especially
you will see,
for you.
Yeah, for me, everybody
Super
knows.
fan here.
Huge nerd. You'll see many familiar symbols, names, and props, and that includes familiar faces, like the Klingons, of course. They have been in every television adaptation of Star Trek since 1966.
And here are the masterminds behind the reimagined Klingons for Star Trek Discovery, makeup and design experts Glenn Hetrick and Neville Page.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys. So I guess the first thing I have to say is, what is this? Like, we can't ignore this thing sitting on the desk, right?
It's the periscope helmet that the Klingons wear on the sarcophagus ship. It's basically a HUD helmet that allows them to navigate their vessel.
And one of the things that we were intrigued by, it looks like it weighs about 50 pounds, but in fact, can I pick it up?
Sure.
Yeah. So it's...
Don't drop it.
Yeah. It's really weighs $1 million, it costs $1 million. Can they see through this?
Only with the special Klingon HUD technology. Otherwise, no.
I'm looking to see. There are literally no.
He wants to put it on.
Yeah, I definitely do, but I will after the show's over.
So I think I was totally stunned by the amount of detail here.
Yeah.
And it reminds me a lot of maybe Asian art or something we've seen from that era.
Yeah, it's highly influenced by the references of Asian art and multicultural as well. But the question that one can speculate is, are we inspired to put that into the design, or are the Klingons the one that introduced that art motif in ancient alien theory to us?
So in canon, too, you see a massive amount of cultural reference. So we're not just using our own terrestrial knowledge in order to infuse it into the art to make it look cool. We're also constantly looking at everything in canon and saying, where did Klingon, where did the aesthetic come from? How was it generated in the original series, and how did it evolve into next gen? And so there's a cultural patina that we're trying to put on all of our Klingons that really starts to widen that parameter, because they grew up in an empire on a group of planets, not on a single planet. So if you think about how different our architecture and our fashion and our food is on one planet, how massively different would the Klingon empires from house to house be if they grew up on different worlds?
That is an interesting way to consider the Klingon Empire. One of the things that the fans, those of us who are fans, were intrigued by is the way you actually physically made the Klingons look differently from going back to the early, the original series. Tell me a little bit about the thinking, sort of changing their outward appearance, not just the technology, but how they physically look.
Well, part of it is a mandate from the producers. Brian Fuller really planted the seed as to what he wanted it to be. And he wanted them to be hairless. He wanted them to be more sophisticated, both culturally. And so the whole hairless thing lent itself to, how do we reconcile that goal, but have it justified in some morphological way? So one of the things that you get to do when you take the hair off is reveal what's underneath. And what's underneath exposes that they're an apex warrior, and they have a higher sense of vision, a higher sense of awareness, with sensory pits, much like a python has the ability to sense heat. So you'll see there's all these pits in the back of the head and on the top of their ridges. And it's a way to validate and qualify even having ridges.
So the thing about the Klingons is that there have been various iterations of this species that you could kind of draw on, and I suppose there were some limitations because you had to make sure that your version within the timeline made sense. But then you had to come up with brand new species. The Kelpian, right? So did you have any information about who they were supposed to be before you started to design them?
It was limited because we all wanted to figure out what the Kelpians would be. But I think a fun part of that story is how Glenn and I, wanted a particular actor to play that role, Doug Jones.
Yeah, we've worked with him before, and he's sort of just the most amazing suit performer. And there's a pantomime, and there's a level of performance that has to be applied when one is in prosthetics to work through the prosthetic and to emote. It's not as easy as obtaining the subtlety of not having a prosthetic covering your face. So that drove the design, and honestly, there were iterations of Saru. So it starts with just a conversation, and you start trying to synthesize the vision of the writers and the producers and the director, and then Neville give them a bunch of different options digitally. And in this case, we actually pursued two separate directions. almost simultaneously, so they could see it physically in full scale, till we arrived at the aesthetic that was appropriate, and it was just days before, really.
It was days.
I mean, yeah, we were painting.
What's funny is I interviewed Doug Jones a couple of times, and the first thing I said to him is, "You got no butt." Because when he walks across the set, you look behind, and he's literally got no booty. And I was like, I know you probably don't have one in real life, like because you're really flat. But you took that into account when designing his look. You told me.
You want to embrace, for lack of a better gesture, you want to embrace his assets.
You're right, very good.
And that is why we really wanted to have Doug be this character. So to your point, how do we design? Sometimes it is just the design dictating who would be in it. And then there's who's in it really informs us as to what the design should be, and Doug really informed what this design should be.
He also talked about the fact that the way you mentioned how he moves, which is he likened it to being a runway model. That sachets across the runway, I guess, for lack of a better word, that was incorporated into his character.
Yeah, and that was magnified by his giant hoof stilettos.
Yeah, the boots really changed his silhouette and the way he walks, and we were aware of that. I mean, the great thing about Star Trek, other than the fact that I'm a lifelong insane Trek fan.
Huge.
So like when you get into it and you're getting to participate and evolve in that world, but then we're surrounded by all these amazing people, and I'm not just saying this because they're probably watching. It's the most collaborative experience we've ever had. So we get to speak with Gretchen and Aaron and the other executives and really sort of give our angles on ideas, and they get folded into, it's a very group process where we share information and then make decisions based on that information together. And in this case, he was able to talk to Doug while we're doing this. And so we know Doug so well, we know what he was capable of, and that became part of the design. And we knew where they wanted to take him as a character in terms of his personality. That very much informed the design as well.
Before we let you go, I got to ask you guys were judges on Face Off.
Yep.
Right? So you're used to ripping people apart.
Yes, we're judging you right
now.
Gently.
And then here you are. Well, some might take issue with the word gently, but here you are now, right? You know Star Trek fans are nuts. Were you concerned about how they would rip you guys apart? And how have you been received?
I knew it was coming, but we were just talking to the fans directly in Vegas. I said, I absolutely understand that each series, it's sort of our duty to evolve it and make it something new. So when Next Gen came out, I didn't watch till season 4 because I was so offended there was a Star Trek.
I was the same.
Other than
Me too.
right?
Me too.
But then when you get into it, it was my favorite. It's my favorite of the series now.
Right.
So I hope that today that they're capable of seeing that this is something completely new and different and ready for the modern world, and they embrace it very quickly because the changes we're just getting started. There's way more to come.
And if the crew of the Star Trek Discovery ever come across a Gorn and you reimagine a Gorn, please come back and talk to us.
We would love to.
We'll put it on the schedule.
All right.
Amanda, Neville, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.